There's a reason Senate Bill 1 this year is Senate Bill number 1. This property tax relief bill was the central campaign promise from new Indiana Governor Mike Braun. The bill passed the Republican-dominated Senate, but without the teeth the governor wanted. In fact, he said if this same version passes the House, he'll veto it because it doesn't offer what he calls true relief for homeowners. Do you feel like the House is moving this legislation along at a pace that you'll be happy with the ultimate outcome?
We'll land the plane in a place that is going to be enough for them to have covered that, but not to have the windfall that many received because they weren't respecting their own taxpayer.
Them, in this case, would be the local counties, cities, libraries, schools, and the like that can pass levies over and above the previously passed property tax caps. As you have likely heard from some of the Republicans who gave some level of pushback, especially in the Senate, that essentially their fear is you're trading a property tax cut for a separate sort of a tax increase someplace along the line to make up for the revenue that's lost. Is it a situation where you're taking out of your left pocket and put it in the right?
We don't want them to lose any revenue other than the revenue that they took from taxpayers that wasn't needed to keep them healthy. So with any jurisdiction, they're never, even if they got by with it, wanting to give back. But they threw, and this isn't all of them, some were respectful to where they didn't raise their tax revenues above and beyond what they legitimately needed.
So you feel as though, pardon me, you feel as though that your tax plan moving forward, at least as it stands today, has the ability to bring about the type of relief you'd like to see without additional taxes having to be tacked on at the local level.
Yes, I think here we're just asking them to acknowledge that they have record cash balances in many cases, already some shiny objects that they spent money on. That'll be more difficult because they've already spent it, at least in the cases where they're sitting on, a lot of cash reserves. They're not going to be impacted much at all. So
speaking frankly, I was going to say, so speaking frankly with this, you're essentially telling the locals that they need to perhaps look at cutting some programs or some level of other spending to make up for what you see as relief that's needed.
If they've gone way above the baseline of where they would have been in 21, and if they've gone way above covering that baseline at a reasonable growth rate of, say, 3%, and if they've covered their inflationary costs, all the rest is where they've overtaxed their own citizens in those jurisdictions.
Another major item being addressed this session is the skyrocketing Medicaid costs in the state. A House committee this week dropped one of two major provisions in the Senate-passed bill. Critics say that provision would have likely seen thousands of people dropped off the rolls through no fault of their own. That provision would have capped the number of people on the Healthy Indiana plan to 500,000, meaning upwards of 250,000 people would face being dropped from coverage. What happens if the federal government doesn't handle this issue, in your mind, correctly? What happens to the state budget?
Well, I think for health care, I'm a believer that everyone should have it. It should be accessible. We just need to lower the costs. We're in the worst of both worlds. It runs like an unregulated utility. It's got a heavy involvement with the federal government, and they run things so poorly that they're borrowing $1 trillion every 6 months now. When I got there 6 years ago, it was annually.
Whatever passes the House for both of these major bills will need to be settled with the Senate bills, since major changes have already happened. It's likely both issues and the constitutionally mandated two-year state budget will not be passed and signed until the very end of the session at the end of April. Stay tuned for that. The governor and I also discussed road funding, his openness to adding toll highways to the state, cultural issues like his transgender executive orders, and the Indiana version of DOGE. You can hear those answers in this exclusive interview on our WSBT-22 YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. Here's another story you may like, and subscribe to the WSBT-22 YouTube channel.